where real estate pros, business minds, and thought leaders share the secrets to success. Welcome to Call Me Successful.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we're very excited to have our next guest on our podcast. Today, we have John Foong, who's the Managing Director and the Chief Commercial Officer of Domain. John, welcome to our podcast.
It is wonderful to be here. Congrats. It is so good to be in this studio. It's freaking awesome. Well done.
Thank you, John. I want to get started in this. So you're in Domain now, you're in real estate. What really fascinates me about your career is where it all started and the journey to get to Domain. Can you talk to us about your love of property first and how you got into this role?
Oh, thanks, Avi. Yeah, my love of property again, I guess, a few different sources. Number one, my dad was a real estate agent, and he wasn't actually a great real estate agent. This is back in Sydney, New South Wales, but he was a very good property investor. And this is back in the late 90s. He loved reading magazines at that time, going through all these indexes of all the different suburbs and looking for the capital growth and trying to find the gems, which for us was far north Queensland, southeast Queensland, and basically outer city Perth. So that's kind of what got me hooked. The second was my granny. My granny grew up in Malaysia, and very much a lot of their national sport is out property investing. And that was kind of her heritage, her history. As soon as I turned 18, she helped me out with a deposit. As soon as I got my first income, my first job, we were starting investing. So those two things kind of came together. That was, 2.5 decades ago. And I'm very grateful to be in the game ever since.
So what was your first role? Say coming out of university, right?
Yeah.
Where did you study?
I studied at the University of New South Wales, which is a kind of technology university in Sydney. Going back to that in my early 20s, I really wanted to be a church pastor. That was my calling, I felt. And a lot of what drove me was this desire to help people. And as I volunteered a lot in my teenage years at church, I realized I was surrounded by people who just loved helping people, but did not know how to run an organization. And as a result, they just totally crashed and burned. They ruined their families. They had a lot of problems with church, with employment, because ultimately, if you can't run an organization, you can't ultimately scalably help people. So I had this conviction that if I wanted to help people, whether it's through the church or nonprofit or whatever, I need to learn the best skills I can to run a business. And that led me to study technology and management at the University of New South Wales. And then I was lucky enough to join this company called McKinsey, which is a business consulting company. And they basically send you out to companies and you are there for a few weeks and you try and help fix their problems and give them advice. It was a great training ground for me.
So McKinsey is like the top echelon of consulting.
Well, I guess we like to think so. It's maybe slightly self-serving, but yes, the top echelon of consulting. It's a wonderful place to grow up, even though it can be very, very challenging to work at sometimes.
So is that the job that took you to the States?
Kind of, yeah. One of the cool things at McKinsey is they encourage you, if you come in at the most junior level, and I was an analyst, to do that for a few years and then pursue further study. And some of these people, they do amazing things. They go study at Oxford or Harvard or things like that. And so after 2 years at McKinsey, being surrounded by some of these people who'd come as analysts, gone and studied amazing MBAs and degrees, and then come back and been more effective managers, that was very much my path. And so I left McKinsey. I set up my applications for business school all around the world. I went and volunteered in Africa for a while and was lucky enough to get into Stanford University to study an MBA and a master's in education.
So you have the most diverse CV that I've seen in a long time. So you go from studying in New South Wales to going to the States, going to Stanford, doing your MBA.
Yeah.
What led you to Silicon Valley? Because that kind of led you to that path of going to California.
Yeah, I mean, when it came to me before my MBA, I'd only lived in the same postcode my whole life. I grew up in the North Shore of Sydney. I never thought I'd leave. And I was pretty much applying to places where I had worked with people from there and I thought they were awesome. And McKinsey was dominated by probably 3 schools. People had done an MBA at Stanford and Harvard, and then people had done philosophy, politics, and economics at Oxford. And they were very much my influences, and they were the kind of places I applied to. I was lucky enough to get into Stanford. So pretty much that's what got me there. I didn't really think of the whole, oh, great, I'll go work in tech or Silicon Valley. I was interested in tech, but I wasn't planning to work there. But Stanford just happens to be the capital of Silicon Valley and where all those silicon companies came from. And so once you're there, and you're surrounded by this mecca of people who want to change the world, believe that anything is possible to develop from a garage somewhere in Palo Alto, and people do change the world from there. It's hard not to get infected with that culture, with that sense of belief that anything is possible.
Do you get that sense, like at the moment, everyone's talking about, do we need MBAs? Do we need university degrees? Especially in tech, the biggest tech founders sometimes have been dropouts.
Yeah.
So how does that resonate with you? Because you went the other way of going down the tertiary path?
Life is extremely unpredictable, and the great thing about life is there are many routes to success. If I think of you, Avi, right, like you haven't done MBA, but the kind of experience you're getting is the kind of thing that people with MBAs kill to get, and probably will never get because they never got the fortune and the hard work to go through this route of entrepreneurship. And so for me, it all depends on what your end goal is. If your end goal is to be a great leader, an MBA is a great risk-adjusted way to get there because you'll expose yourself to some great education. That education will open doors both to incredible connections and incredible companies. If you want to go down the entrepreneurship route, that's probably an even more fulfilling and enriching route. It's probably more risky. And so depending on your appetite for risk and what leverage you have, MBAs cost a lot of money. An MBA is one route to do it, but the way you've done it is probably even more valuable.
So did I read it right that you work for Google?
That's right. Yeah.
So how long were you at Google?
I was at Google for almost 13 years.
So Google is most of the times the defining moment of people's careers, right? In Silicon Valley, if you get to work to Google or Apple.
It's interesting to say that. Google is an amazing place. It changed my life. If you work at Google in Silicon Valley, you are not unique. There are literally hundreds of thousands of people who are like you, which doesn't mean you're not special. My parents think I'm very special, for example. There are plenty of people who work for Google and things like that. And when I was leaving Stanford, the very top people didn't go to Google. And I went to Google and I think I'm pretty good, but the very best people went to hedge funds or they tried to pick the next best startup or the kind of company that was on the rise. Facebook, for example, was a smallish company then and Google was a medium-sized company. So, when you're in Silicon Valley, that's something that makes it so amazing. You are surrounded by people where if you took them out of Silicon Valley, they would be the gem, the top of the class, the mecca, the unique unicorn. But in Silicon Valley, you're surrounded. It kind of resets your expectation of what normal is.
So what did you do at Google? What was your role?
The cool thing at Google is I had about 7 different roles. I started off in marketing. I loved marketing. This is back in 2006. I helped look after marketing strategy in Europe. And then I wanted to get some people management experience, and they were setting up a really large operation in Ireland. So I moved to Dublin, Ireland for 6 years.
Dublin,
yeah. I love Dublin. And actually during that time became an Irish citizen. So I'm Irish-Australian by citizenship. And in Ireland, I worked on the search engine. So I led a technical search quality team, which is basically trying to make sure people didn't cheat their way up the rankings. I did that for a few years. And then I said, look, I've always dreamed of being in sales. I feel very salesy. I love giving pitches, but I never, ever worked in sales. And they so happened to be starting the sales team in Google selling paid Gmail. We call it Google Workspace or Google Cloud now. It was a tiny team back then, barely making $1 million. And I was asked to start this team of 2 people and was lucky enough to get on that wave really early. Grew that team from 2 to 50, then moved to America and ran a team of a few hundred, all selling Gmail, Google Cloud, Google Maps. So Google was, to me, a lot of it we think of as a technology company. Google's actually a talent factory. They find amazing people. Again, another self-serving comment, but let's go with it. They find amazing people. They create an environment where they just want to stick around. They keep providing different opportunities to jump and do something different. It's kind of what you've done like at AKG, right? You come in at one, you might come in and property manage, you might come in as an assistant, and then you jump and jump and jump and jump. Before you know it, you've got ownership, you're a partner, you're opening a new office, you're doing crazy stuff. Google managed to create that at scale, do that for 100,000 people. And I was lucky to have 7 different jobs, during my time there.
So we can thank you for Google Drive.
You can thank me for Google Drive. Yes, there's a product I worked for 10 years. I'm very proud of that.
So what happened after Google? Because is that when you decided to come back to Australia?
Not quite. I've been at Google for 13 years. And what so often happens at Google is you have these restructures and typically they work out really well. And this one didn't work out so well for me. I was left with a smaller job. And look, that can be fine. We just had our first kid. It can be a time in life to be more stable rather than volatile. But while we're in that motion, Uber came along and Uber was setting up a group called Uber for Business. And Uber for Business is Uber's the most expense in the world. A lot of businesses use it for their transportation of their food. And they were looking to set up a particular business division. And I was running all their business accounts, which was about 100,000 at the time. And so that was really interesting. It was a great opportunity, a chance to run another global team, a chance to get into a different but related space. And what they were looking for was for me to bring my, business-to-business expertise from Google, which was much more mature, to Uber, which was a relatively immature company. So I jumped there for a few years.
How do you get these roles? Because is it similar to here? Is it who you know, or you apply for roles, or you get headhunted?
I did a bit of analysis on myself on that question because I read a report that said, look, 75% of roles are on this kind of like shadow job market. They're not necessarily advertised. It's someone taps you on the shoulder or a friend comes up to you. I said, 75%, really? Is it that many? And then I realized actually, every single job I've had at McKinsey, including the Google jobs, is actually been not through a public process. So in McKinsey, I was hired as a campus graduate. They came on campus and they did a roadshow and then you signed up for it. So it was a very traditional, like everyone who wanted to at University of New South Wales or University of Sydney could sign up for it. Even my first job at Google, this internship, was not a public internship. It was Google coming to Stanford, only pitching to Stanford customers or Stanford University students. And then my actual job at Google was not publicly advertised. I remember when I was doing my internship, I was helping them recruit MBAs, and we were traveling around Europe, and I was presenting as a MBA intern to other MBAs, thinking of working at Google. And I took the train to Switzerland with the person who would actually become my boss. We just got chatting. We're having a chat just like this. He was asking my career and what I'd do, and I said, I want to be a leader, and I'd love to lead a team. And he goes like, hey, we'll set up this shop in Ireland. Like, we need leaders. Do you want to come and have a go? I said, I really haven't done much leading before in a corporate environment. Would you take me? He said, sure. So that first job was that, and every single job from there at Google was somebody who I'd worked with, done a project with, and said, hey, let's have a crack. And even this Uber job was someone who had worked with at Google, who jumped to Uber and knew me and knew what I could do. And even this job at Domain, which came up after my job at Uber, that was because people I'd worked with at McKinsey, who were now in the recruiting business, I was having a conversation with, we were talking about it. They said, hey, I know someone at this firm who's looking for a job, who's advertising a job at Domain. And then my boss, the CEO of Domain, Jason Pellegrino, was also at Google for a decade. So even though we hadn't worked with each other directly, we crossed over. My Australian team dotted line into him. And so all these things, your network truly is your net worth. That's the kind of thing where most of my jobs in my life have been through some kind of connection or some kind of association.
But not everyone can do that, John. I think the thing about you is that you always listening to people, you're always talking to people, you're always out and about. That's one thing that I admire about you is that every real estate conference you're there. and for some reason, like everyone says to me, John does the best wrap up. So you're probably the one that's sitting there listening to everyone the whole day and taking it all in.
Yeah.
Your thirst of knowledge is something that I really admire about you.
Thank you.
So Domain, tell me about Domain. So you got handpicked for that role in Domain.
Yeah.
Moved from the States to Australia.
Yeah.
Big move for you and your family.
It was a big move, bigger than I realized.
So the job must have really attracted you.
Part of this is just back in, mid-2021, so I've been at Domain for 3 years. You've got to remember, this was COVID everywhere, and the US COVID was pretty strange, right? You had this incredible polarization politically that played out in an environment where some people were kind of live free and die, and others were kind of didn't want to leave their house. And that's a very toxic environment. And we looked to Australia, who I certainly didn't get all right here in Australia, but certainly the way it was being handled in Australia, even though every state would have done things differently, was a lot more rational, a lot more reasonable, a lot more balanced. And who knew how long COVID was going to go for? So that appealed to us. Even though my wife was from the States, my family here in Sydney. So there were a lot of reasons for us to give Australia a try. And so when I was leaving Uber, or thinking about leaving Uber, I applied to jobs both in San Francisco, Silicon Valley, and in Australia. And it turned out that in Australia, my comment at Google before, in Australia, there aren't that many people like me, for better or for worse, right? And so if you value the skill set I bring, there aren't many people to choose from. And certainly Jason is a very progressive CEO. He wanted me to bring on all of the lessons from Google, from Uber to Domain. And if he wanted to find someone to do that, there weren't that many people in country to do so. So it ended up being kind of a match made in heaven. Where for us personally, it was a wonderful adventure as a family, well, at least in retrospect. It was traumatic and trying and challenging and growing at the time. But a chance for us to get close to the family, a chance for us to build a new life in Australia, and a chance for me to be a bigger fish in a smaller pond. And it's been the best job, the best move I've ever made.
So day one at Domain, you're starting out and you look at the landscape of portals.
Yep.
We're going to get into the portals straight away.
Yeah, let's do it.
So what do you think you're going to change? Because Domain's strong nationally, number 2 player nationally probably.
Yeah.
Lots of things going on, lots of things going right, lots of things going wrong. Like what do you think your vision for Domain when you come in day one as opposed to what you're thinking now? How's that changed?
Yeah, I think when you come into a new job, there's always a naivety, right? You're infused with hope and expectation and desire, and you obviously don't know where the skeletons are, the things that need to change, all that kind of stuff. I think the cool thing at Domain for me has been what I expected it would be, warts and all, is pretty much how it's played out. So from the outside, I grew up in Domain. So, Sydney Domain's a stalwart, right? Like, and I, particularly areas I grew up with, which are the Sydney Morning Herald and the Australian Financial Review areas. Domain has been the portal that most grew up with. It was it's universally branded and recognised, particularly in that premium, that rich and ready segment, of Sydney and Melbourne. And so for me, I was expecting to come to a company which, had a great brand name, but wasn't able to adapt and keep up with the evolving digitization, with, newer people coming in who didn't grow up with Domain, whether it's migrants or younger agents or things like that. And there's almost an expectation I'll come in and find a culture which has a great pride, but also one that needs to change and reinvent itself if it's going to continue to be relevant. And I think that's basically what Domain has been. It's a beautiful brand, a well-loved brand, incredibly loyal people, loving people, great relationships with industry, a great reputation spanning back decades, unique assets like print and the relationship with Channel 9. But, as we've talked about, Avi, like what got Domain here won't get Domain there. It requires change. It's going to work out. How's it going to be as relevant to younger agents who didn't grow up with Domain than the ones who have been with Domain for decades? How's it going to really penetrate some of those strongholds where Domain hasn't been as dominant, regional areas, even some of the smaller capital cities? What are we going to do in an environment where there's less and less reliance on print and there's more reliance on portals? And now this new age where there's AI and proactivity and generative AI and suggestive search, what do we do in moving from a classified-centric business to one where the right match is one that's given to you, not the one you find yourselves? So there's all the questions I guess I expected to figure out and find, and that's exactly what Domain has been for me.
I'm intrigued about this, the partnerships that you guys have with the media companies, and of course you're the owner of Domain as a media company.
That's right.
How does that fit in? Like, what's the strategic reasoning behind that? Because we've got Nine.
Yep.
And then we've got Sydney Morning Herald.
That's right.
And is it Fairfax?
Yeah, all the Fairfax. So The Age in Melbourne and things like that.
So is that a play for audience, or what is it? Well, why is it all set up like that?
Yeah, so let's not confuse causation with correlation. Like in this case, that's just been historically the case. I mean, similar to our competitor, which is half owned by News Corp, it so happened that it spawned out of media companies, newspapers, because that's the original real estate classifieds, and they continue to hold a majority stake. And that's true in other places of the world. Though in other places of the world that was the case, but the newspapers have sold out of their real estate businesses. In other cases, the real estate portals have not come from a newspaper background. So from Australia, it is a historical relic rather than anything where if there were no portals and a new portal was designed today, it's not clear it would be owned by a media company or a newspaper company. So it kind of just is. Now, all the fact that it is, though, means that there are some really cool opportunities that come from it. So for us and Channel 9 and Fairfax, who are, our majority owners, there is a mutual interest in giving the customer the information and the content they need and finding a way to commercialize that in a way that's relevant to them and real estate agents. So if you go read an article on the Sydney Morning Herald or the Australian Financial Review, and it's an interesting article, that is a good thing for the people who run those newspapers because they want a captive audience. They want an audience that comes back and go, wow, I want to figure out what the hell's worth of boughts, or I want to figure out what's happening with property prices. I'm going back to the Sydney Morning Herald. And they do that. But when they do that, the fact that they will go then to the Domain website and click on an inquiry, which is worth hundreds of dollars to a real estate agent, that's actually a good thing for them. And that's a good thing for the real estate agent. And that's a good thing, for the newspaper company as well. So you've kind of created this ecosystem, which, again, it was started from scratch today. I don't know if we'll play it that way, but the fact that we've had those historical ownership legacies has made for some interesting opportunities.
Now, as a principal, I always have this question in my head, like, who's my client? Is it the real estate agent that we employ? Is it the customer who's decided to sell with us? Or is it the buyer that decided to buy with us?
Yeah.
Who is actually Domain's client?
This is the thing where I've been involved in, selling enterprise software for most of my life. And we call this B2B to C.
B2B to C.
Which is you're selling to a business who's selling to a customer. So for example, back at Google, I used to sell to, a big company like, maybe like a Ray White, for example. They were one of Google Cloud's first big customers in Australia. Who was Ray White the customer? Well, in a sense, we're serving Ray White. We're providing them enterprise software, but we're not doing it for the sake of Ray White employees. So those are very important. We're doing it so they can please their customers, which are in turn are people trying to sell their house. But in turn, who are sellers trying to please? Sellers are really trying to make buyers happy because they can make multiple buyers interested. That will be the best outcome for both the buyer and for the seller themselves. So for me, you know those old kind of like Russian or porcelain dolls that kind of stack in each other, where you have a little doll and a bigger doll and a bigger doll. That to me is kind of my
babushka, I think that's cool.
Avi, you are both an officer and a gentleman, it seems. But yeah, I think for me, that's how I see Domain. Ultimately, our first set of customers are real estate agents, right? We need to make sure that they have what they need to do their job. But really, what they are caring about is how to make the sellers ecstatic about the difficult process of selling a house. What sellers really care about are buyers. Who is trying to make a move and what are they looking for? And often we know that many sellers are buyers simultaneously, and certainly all of them are during the course of their life. And so for me, what I need to solve for is not one set of customers, but all of them. My direct customer is an agent and an agency, but ultimately everyone is caring about how do we get buyers interested. And this whole thing breaks down unless everybody wins. So everybody is my customer, Avi, in answer to your question.
So going back to buyers, do you think Domain has made inroads in that and trying to attract more buyers and trying to attract buyers who are ready to buy?
Yeah. So I think, look, I'm biased. I think the answer is yes. Let me provide some facts because we ask ourselves this question pretty rigorously. You know, there's a number of ways to look at that question. Are we making inroads with buyers? One very simple way is how many buyers, unique buyers, visit our website, this month. And now we're close to record highs. We're over 7 million in the latest month. We've averaged 6.5 million over the last 12 months. That's up 10% year on year. And we look at our share as a percentage of all portals. That's also up year on year. So that's one kind of measure. But then we also look at the measure of like how many people are uniquely using Domain and not other portals. And that's like about 1 million folks. So these are folks who do not use any other portal. These don't even include the people who use multiple portals but prefer Domain. That's over 1 million, right? And that is growing over time. We then profile those buyers and go, we use companies such as Roy Morgan to say, what is the profile? Are these buyers more likely to buy in the next 12 months, the average? Are they more likely to be premium investors, richer? And we look at those and we find that of all the portals, Domain has the highest proportion of those who are, we call rich, over $200,000 income, and those who are ready, signal they're likely to buy in the next 12 months. So we look at all these signals, we look at the 150,000 who are in the market right now and what percentage use Domain, which is almost all of them across Australia. And that's how we judge if we are growing our influence. And then we get down to the states like Queensland and things like that, and we say, is our audience growing over time? So this is what we look for to assess that question.
So going back to agents now, because you have all this buyer data, you're showing it's growing, the 7 million views.
Yeah.
How the constant battle that we find with portals and the agents is trying to justify prices.
Totally.
Like, does that frustrate you? Because that's becomes a large part of your role. Like at the end of financial year, every time is how are we going to justify this to our audience? How are we going to justify it to the agents? Like, what does that involve in the leadership? Like, how does Domain go out and do that outreach to the agents?
I absolutely sympathize with everyone in that babushka chain. Right? If you're selling a house and you're going to say, hey, you're going to pay this agent commission, on top of that, you need to pay $10,000 for a VPA, even though you can borrow 100% of that and not pay back for 6 months through a Realty Assist or something. The obvious reaction, particularly in times where our consumer confidence is at near all-time lows and have been for a few years, the natural reaction of seller is, what the heck? And I totally get that. And if you're an agent trying to make that case, that's hard because there are many other agents in your suburb who are making the same case who might be happy to shave $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 off the VPA. So I sympathize with sellers, I sympathize with agents, and I sympathize with principals who are trying to get their agents to what's in their best long-term interests, which is to have a big VPA and get marketing out there and find the next customer and get the best price for your customer. I sympathize with everyone in that chain. So it does not surprise me when people push back and go, oh my goodness, Domain, you put up your prices by 8%. Like, what are you doing? And part of it is me trying to educate. Actually, we're spending tens of millions of dollars on marketing, tens of millions of dollars on technology, and tens of millions of dollars on commercial teams to service and do customer support. So these price rises, actually indicate the increase in cost of doing business. And then I also try and argue from a value point of view and say, hey, look, the difference between being on Domain and off Domain on $1 million house is $36,600. Because we know from that 7 million unique visitors, for that million people only on Domain, for the millions more who prefer Domain or read unprint magazines, you're going to pick up 1, 2, 3, 4 extra bidders. You're going to push the price up. It'll cost you $1,000, but it'll generate $30,000 more. We need to go out there and make that case of all the things we're doing. And so to me, this is business and is absolutely my job to make sure that people who are making very understandable reactions to, oh my goodness, so expensive, have the data they need to the best thing that's in the best interest of themselves and their customers. And hopefully that's using domain. We certainly think that there's a strong ROI in doing so. And if the answer for them is not, then it's my responsibility to kind of make that case more forcefully.
The race to weaponization for portals at the moment is to find sellers. Like that's the golden nugget that portals are working on. What is domain doing in that space? Because you made strong headway into that.
Yeah. I think my humble answer is we've done a lot and there's a lot more to do, right? So if you think about us, what we need to be doing is when a buyer is out there saying, oh, I am looking for, a house, and when a seller is out there saying, I'm looking for an agent, how do they find an agent? And let me say that again. If a seller is out there looking for an agent, how does domain help that discovery process? And when an agent is out there looking for the next seller, how is domain helping that particular process? And so, for example, with us, one of the big products we've worked on is LeadScope, and that is a propensity tool. Propensity meaning trying to assess the probability that this particular house will sell in the next 12 months. And we think we have best-in-class software. We have prediction software that is 30%. That is, we've predicted any given house we predict that will come to the market. That's true 30% of the time. And that may not sound like a lot, but it's a lot better than cold calling, which is about 2%. Right?
30% is very high.
Very high, very high, right? And so for us, we want to help an agent be twice as effective in half their time. And that is a tool that we actually first used in Queensland, and we're very grateful to Queensland agencies for helping us build that tool. We're trying to get that tool out there to really help agents find the next listing. And at the same time, really trying to make sure that agents' brands out there with every listing, the photos, the logos. So whenever someone is browsing as a buyer, they're being bombarded by the legends at AKJ. So they know that when it's time to sell, there's some of the names they connect with it. So this is some of the things we're trying to do. There's a lot more we're doing in this space, which I'm excited to talk about one day. But we know that's the number one challenge for agents, and that's the number one thing we want to help with.
One of the things that agents and principals and real estate groups are scared of is the monetization of seller leads, because we feel that we pay to be on the website, whether it's us or the seller. Where does the monetization of the seller leads go to? Because that's the real fear of, hey, the portal's got all the data, the portal's going to charge us for seller leads in the future. So where does this stop? Or where does it start for you guys?
Yeah. So for us, we are very, very sensitive to that question, right? Because obviously seller leads, even though they're valuable, if you're now paying 20, 25% of your commission to whoever gives you the seller leads, that's a pretty big hit. So even though you love the lead, it kind of sucks, particularly if you're already paying that particular provider for other things, for the listing or things like that. We have a vision to be the most agent-friendly portal. And so when it comes to pricing things, we're trying to do this way that's very, very sensitive. So for example, LeadScope, it's an all-you-can-eat function. You pay for it as an agency, and then you consume as many leads as you can get. And if you sell 100 houses with leads you get, fantastic. It costs you the same that if you don't use it all. And we obviously want people to use as much as possible. And we have priced in that way to reduce any conflict of interest between us and agencies, right? And that's something we've done very, very intentionally, knowing that other folks in the market are taking different approaches, and there's a natural suspicion which people react to. So that's our process, and that's our principle. Just to, kind of like argue the other way, it's very, very hard to predict how these models will work out in the future. How do you figure out how commissions will go? And in the US right now, there's this whole confusion around what's going to happen with, buyers' commissions and seller agents' commissions will happen. And so I think for me, my role in studying disruption at Silicon Valley companies is anything is possible. And so I don't want to be disingenuous and say, look, I would never rule anything out, right? But I can certainly tell you, we want to be the most agent-friendly portal. We want to price in a way where there is no distance between our interests and the interests of our main customers, which is real estate agents and their customers. And so for us, a price per lead model starts to introduce a lot of that conflict of interest. A subscription model is nice because it's all you can eat.
So I want to ask you last question about domain and the portal.
Yeah, sure.
So every month there's a new player, right? There's some off-market portal and on-market portal. Everything is just everyone's calling us, sign up to this, sign up to that. Why is it that I find it very fascinating? Everyone's like, we want to take over domain. We want to move past domain. Like it's a search to take domain down rather than number one player. Like, do you find that as well? Or is it just me that's finding that people saying that we're going to take over domain, we're going to become number two? Well, is that weird for you, or is that?
Yeah, I'd say, not too many people are telling that to my face, at least. So they're probably telling you more than they're telling me. Look, competition is a beautiful thing. The only reason we have innovation is because of competition. It's because someone says, I think I can do it better and cheaper. And to do that, there's many different strategies. You can go after number 1, you can go after number 2, you can go after number 27. And this is part of what makes the Australian real estate industry great. It is part of what will make it even better, is where you have everyone out there, both the biggest competitors in Australia and the smallest competitors who think want to have a crack, everyone giving it a go is a good thing. And to me, that is a good thing for Domain as well. Even though we face this tension and people are saying, great, we'll take out Domain first, even though they're big, they're not as big as the other guy. To me, that keeps us honest. It gives us that sense of paranoia, which to me is the defining characteristic of Silicon Valley companies, is that they know that next door in some garage in Palo Alto is someone building a next $1 trillion business. And as someone who's going to take down you, whether you're Blockbuster or IBM, these behemoths which were giant and now are small today, that is the attitude which I want for Australia. And it's one of the reasons I love Australia, because I think it has some of that great paranoia of Silicon Valley, but it doesn't have some of that dysfunctional imbalance and polarization, which I think is a lot of America. And so for me, I welcome competition. I encourage it. Now, I believe that competition should be intelligent. So for me, when people come and say, hey, look, we're building a competing portal, the first thing I say is, fantastic, well done, let's compete hard. The second thing I ask is like, what can we do together? It may be in your interest to compete with us. It may be your interest to collaborate with us and compete with someone else. And I don't want to be prescriptive about that, but I certainly know the secret to great competition is actually great partnerships. And it's one of the things I love about how you've done your business, Avi. You've constructed partnerships with different folks, and partnerships in the broader sense of the word, not just suppliers and customers, but even starting media agencies and things like that. It comes from a vision of trying to construct a better ecosystem where we help each other and in some ways we compete. And that's the attitude I want at Domain. And so for people who are going to compete with Domain, I'd say bring it on, but have the conversation. I'd love to chat with you and kind of figure out what we can do together. And it might make sense we shake hands and compete hard on the battlefield, and that's the best thing for the customer. Or maybe we collaborate, and that's the best thing for the customer. Both might work.
Bring it on. I love that. I'm going to ask you a few things about real estate agents, because I think you meet and talk to more real estate agents than anyone else in the industry. So you're always everywhere. So when I see a LinkedIn post, I'm about to comment, John Foong's already commented saying, well done. So you're very open and honest with your communication with the agents. You're always at the conferences. What have you seen in, what's the qualities of the best agents out there? What's your view of it?
Real estate in Australia is a highly relational business. And so pretty much, I think it's very hard to be a great agent if you're not great at relationships, which generally means, a lot of that's being a good person. Adam Grant has this book called Give and Take, right? Where basically it looks at people who are givers and takers and matchers in relationships. Do you suck more? Do you give more? And the general finding is when you give, you win, because you expand the pie for other people. And through the whether you call it karma or reciprocity, people want to help. You just create value for other people. And so for me, whether I look at some of your great agents like Rebecca or things like that, it's people who have figured out a way to create value for other people. That's probably the biggest single thing I see in great real estate agents. But on the flip side, it's people who've learned how to build a factory. If you've got a real estate agent, if you want to have a family and things like that, maybe you can work 60 hours a week. And even that, I don't think that's sustainable in the long run, right? You've got to scale every one of those minutes, which means you cannot do everything. And the best real estate agents, if we look at an Alexander Phillips or something like that, he might actually have not a giant team, but he's a team of 6 or 7 people. And he's worked out how those people make the most of every minute of his day and how they make the most of every minute of their day using technology, using AI, using systems, using spreadsheets. It doesn't have to be super high tech, but it's thinking about high scale. I remember this saying at Google, which is before you build to scale, you've got to master the craft. Before McDonald's built McDonald's, they had to figure out how do we build a burger in the simplest, most effective way, and how do we do that now 1 billion times? And that's what great real estate agents do. They are fundamentally good people who are trying to create value for other people, whether it's buyers, sellers, partners, agencies, media, consumers. But they've worked out their secret sauce and how do they scale it so every minute of their time is worth doing, and every minute that can be done by someone else or outsourced is done by someone else. And then what they do is they rinse and repeat. They hopefully form a sustainable lifestyle where they're working 40, 50 hours, but they can do it for 20, 30 years, raise a family, rather than kind of go out and conk out after a few years. That's what long-term success looks like, I think.
This brings us to our last question. What's your definition of success?
Oof. Wow. For me, for success, I think about alignment. I think alignment between what is my goals and what am I doing. And so for me, I have a definition of success which I can talk to, but the way I judge whether I am acting in a way that's considered success is I look at the alignment between how I spend my time, my calendar, what I worry about, and I think about, does that align with what's important to me? So for example, you think about my goals, there's a few. First and foremost, I want to be a great husband and a great father. That is my commitment to my family. Even though I think what you and me do, Avi, and this team here is super important, it pales in comparison to be a good person, a great family member. So the first question I ask is my behavior, is my calendar, is my attitude, is my mindset aligned with the most important goal? Right? How do I spend my time? What percentages with family? How do I react when there's a crisis at family versus a crisis at work? These micro tells helps me understand if I'm behaving in a way that's aligned with success. I think about success in work. I have a set of short-term goals. We have, like you, revenue goals. But I have a longer-term goal at work is I want to leave a legacy of leadership. I want people to come work for me, but they work for me for 2 months, 2 years, 2 decades to go, wow, working in John's leadership, work at Domain was like a career accelerator. It was like working at Google. I got 5 years experience in one. And I want to know that I can do that, the real work for me, leadership development, at the same time that I'm helping my shareholders, my stakeholders, people who invest in Domain, meet their short-term goals of share prices, of revenue, of profit, and things like that. So I do that for every area of our life, my health, my spiritual side, my walk, my learning, my friends. And I have a goal for each of those things, but that real success is not even do I achieve those goals, because frankly, those goals will keep changing. And every decade that goes by, I realize my goals shift. It really is, am I acting in alignment with what I think success is? And that's really what we can judge ourselves for.
John Foong, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate the chat.
Avi Khan, the pleasure is all mine. Congrats on what you guys have built here. It's an honor to be in the room with such a esteemed media company as well. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.